Hey, what's up everybody on YouTube? Your boy Big Murph again. In today's video I'm going over this Hobo aka intercooler that I just recently copped on eBay for under $80. And actually this is kind of like a replica of the AirTech intercooler that you see many of the mini enthusiasts run on their car. It's a fraction of the price. A lot of the blogs that I'm reading are saying that the two intercoolers are very similar in construction and in material, and some may even believe that they are manufactured by the same source. It's just that AirTech goes further into refining the quality of the intercooler, and they also add their own proprietary air diverter system, which is basically a seal that goes around the intercooler and it forces the air through the intercooler more effectively. Now the issue in particular with this eBay intercooler, and you'll read a lot on the online blogs, is that the ends of the intercooler here are smaller in overall circumference than the original intercooler, and thus causing boost leaks because the original intercooler clasps or clamps, whatever you want to call these, are made for the larger size of the original Behr intercooler, and so when you go to torque these down, it leaves less pressure, so therefore boost can leak through here. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this here. Now specifically I'm having boost leaks on the cold end of the intercooler. You see the way it works is air is drawn in through your intake, it gets compressed by the supercharger, and then when it leaves the supercharger, that compressed air is very high temperature, and so it comes through the intercooler where the air-to-air interface cools the charged air through the cores, and it comes in through the cool side, which then goes into the intake manifold. Now the boost leak I'm having is on the smaller end, and I'm going to remedy this problem for you guys today, and so I hope that this helps you guys out. This is an issue that you are most likely going to face. I've read, like I said, many blogs, and a lot of people who have bought the eBay intercoolers all have the same issue, where the ends of the intercooler are smaller in overall diameter, overall circumference than the original intercooler, causing boost leaks. So with that said, let's go ahead and start by removing this intercooler. Again, this is a T30 Torx bolt, so we'll go ahead and use our trusty Hitachi impact to remove this very fast. There's also going to be two 10mm bolts here that hold this intercooler bracket to the intake manifold, so we'll go ahead and remove that one as well. Now I noticed it was an issue when I was doing the video shoot of the Boss boost gauge that I just recently installed as well, and when I did the third gear pull in that video, shortly after that pull I had a check engine light that came on, and so when I went home and I opened the hood, I noticed that I started hearing a slight hissing sound coming from the smaller end of the intercooler, where it interfaces with the horn that goes into the intake manifold. And so I found out that it was leaking at the very ends of the connection, which I'll show you in just a second. And so I did a scan of the car using my OBD2 scanner and the app that I'm using, which I'll link down below in the description. And this is the code that I was getting here. Okay, and this code is associated with boost leak, and so let me show you the area of where, like I said, it was leaking. So in particular, it was leaking here at the very edges or the ends of the intercooler outlet here, and I guess the issue is that, being that it is a smaller diameter, the stock clasp or clamps are unable to clamp the edges as tightly as the top and the bottom. And so we're going to remedy that problem today, and let me show you how it's done here. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do before I actually show you how you remedy the problem is I wanted to compare the size difference between these two intercoolers. So on the left here you have the original Behr intercooler, which is supplied to BMW Mini. That's what comes factory on your Model S vehicles. Now of course the 𝐂𝐨𝐨𝐬𝐭 and the GP intercoolers, I believe, are slightly larger in size. And on the right here is the hobo intercooler. Now let's start with the height difference of the core. If you look at the original one here, I am getting about 7 inches, okay, for the core in height. And with the hobo intercooler I'm getting 9, so that's a 2-inch difference there. And then the width of the core, with the original one we are getting about 11 inches. And with the hobo we get about 11 3/4 inches of the core. And in thickness, the original one is 2 inches, and with the hobo we get about 2.5 inches. Now we also want to compare the overall length of it. So from end to end, the original one is about 15 3/4 inches, and with the hobo, I keep calling it a hobo because that's what they call it on the forums, but in any case we get 16.5 inches, and so you can see there is a difference there, and it is a really tight fit to put this on. The clearances are just very tight, and it makes it very difficult to slip it into the rubber boots. And so I do recommend, if you have an older rubber boot or the original rubber boot and it is in poor condition, that you go ahead and replace it, because it will tear apart when you try to put this on. Now the main difference I want to compare with these two is the diameter of the inlets and outlets. That's the issue I'm having. So I will take the small side here and compare it with the original one. And maybe we can put this together in such a form where we can compare the two. If I line them up here, you can see that although the very edge of it is the same diameter, you can see on this hobo one here, it has a rolled tip where it's kind of raised, okay, and then the remainder of material after that, the surface is kind of reduced in diameter. So this is the part where it is smaller in diameter overall than this one here. So you can see the original one, I mean, it's just consistent diameter throughout, from the edge all the way to actually the core of it here. And so that's the issue I'm having, is this reduced overall circumference or diameter here of the outlet here, and the inlet as well, that's causing the stock clamps not to fully seal when you're torquing it down. Now the remedy for this I'm going to do, it's quite simple actually. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and raise the overall circumference or diameter of this surface here. Now many people on the forums, some of them have tried using electrical tape or some kind of a generic thing, but I got a good material which I found just lying around in the garage, and what I'm going to use is this thermal tape which I found. This is aluminium thermal tape, and I'll show you a picture of it right here. And basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting these into strips which are about an inch thick, inch in width strips. And for the smaller end of the intercooler, I cut them into 14-inch strips. And I'm going to do the same with the larger inlet side of the intercooler, and I'm cutting it to about 16.5-inch strips. Now with the smaller end of the intercooler, I'm going to be putting 4 of these strips to make sure that we raise that surface up enough so that way we can either match or exceed the circumference of the original one to ensure that it will seal. And I'm going to go a step even further with that. And what I did just a while ago is, with the stock clamp, as you can see here, I have shaved off about 1 millimeter from each end of this clamp. Okay, now what that does is that when you shave off 1 millimeter from each end here, okay, it will also allow you to torque the clamp even tighter, because there's less material, to basically stop it, act as a stop. As you're torquing it down, the more material you'll have, it'll stop earlier than if you shave a little bit off of it, and it'll allow you to go further down, which will increase the clamping pressure. So only take off about 2 millimeters on each end on both sides. You have to do it on both sides to match it up. Okay, so with that said, I'll go ahead and pause the video here, and then we'll go ahead and start by cleaning this up and applying the thermal tape on each one of the ends. So basically we're going to use this chem carburetor tool that I have lying around the garage. It's a very strong solvent, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just clean off the edges of it here. And may be so strong enough that it starts to take off some of the cheap finish that they put on it, which is fine because I want this material, this thermal tape, to stick on here very well. You don't want any kind of room for error, and you don't want any leakage, especially the blow-by oil, which can, ultimately lead to the thermal tape peeling off over time. So I want to get rid of as much as I can this kind of a cheapo finish that you put on there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is apply the thermal tape. So again, I just want to start at one end, which I'm going to select here. I want to start off maybe, let's see here. This is the top side here, so I want to start in the center here maybe, and end up back in the center, because I'm not getting any leaks really in the center part here. I'm getting leaks at the edges here, at the ends. So I want to have a consistent amount of material around the ends. So the cut portion can start here, okay, and then we can go about doing that. Let's choose this side here, so we'll just do it like this here. Like it too. You may have to finish this material around. Okay. Okay, so here is a photo showing you exactly how I prepared all of the required materials. So you can see on the top left, this is the thermal tape that I'm using, and right below that there are the 14-inch strips that I'm cutting to place around the small end of the intercooler. I cut about 4 strips. You can use a little bit more if you want, but I'm going to start off with 4 and see if that'll do the trick. And then for the large end, I cut 2 16-inch strips. Both strips are 1 inch in width, which is, the exact width of the surface of the lip there of the end of the intercooler. And on the right side, the right upper corner here of the picture, you can see that I'm going to also go one step further, and I read it on a blog that a guy cut some strips of rubber and he placed it on the outer surface of the rubber boot. And what he did was he wrapped around some rubber material. In this case I'm using some scrap bicycle tube, and that creates a thicker surface for the clamp to clamp down on. So you can also do that as well. So I'm using all three methods here of trimming the clamps itself by 1 millimeter each on each end, placing the thermal tape on the intercooler lip to increase the diameter size, and cutting these rubber strips to place them around the rubber boot right before I clamp them with the metal clamps, so that way I for sure will have a tight seal on this intercooler. Alright, you guys, so here's the final product here of what I did. Let me just review to you. So as I told you earlier, I wrapped the lip, the edges here of the outlet and inlet of the intercooler with aluminum thermal tape, but I went a step further, and what I did was I wrapped the entire cold side, the cold end of the horn on the cold side of the intercooler with gold thermal reflective tape. I also wrapped the outer edges as well with the same kind of thermal tape, and in theory what this will do is this will reflect any of the heat that is being subjected or radiated onto this intercooler, especially during sitting like in traffic when you're not moving. Because this intercooler is larger than the original one, it actually acts as a heat soak if you're not in motion. So if you're sitting at a stoplight or in traffic and idling, the heat from the engine is radiating onto the surface of this intercooler, and since this is larger than that, this has a much more surface area to accept heat, and so to kind of minimize that effect, I put reflective thermal tape to reflect some of that radiative heat. So there it is. I don't apply it here to the hot side of the intercooler because you know, you kind of want the heat to kind of bleed off on the hot side, and so if you put this tape over it, it kind of you know, negates that effect, and so heat will kind of be like insulated on this side, and we don't want that. We want as much hot air or hot heat to be dissipated. So I leave this side completely blank. Of course, the top and bottom surface of the intercooler blank, so that way as the air is moving through here, you know, it's able to, you know, contact the material to take away that heat effectively. Now I just wanted to point out one other major difference between this eBay Ahobo intercooler and the original Behr intercooler. This is something that I don't really see talked about in the mini community forums, but I think I should point it out to you guys because it is an important thing. So this is the hot side of where when the compressed air is entering the intercooler. Now if you look inside, this is how the internal core looks like. Okay, let me go and focus there for you. So you can see here, let me show you what I'm talking about. The core has these flat surfaces here in between each of the radiators here. So there's a radiator, and there's a aluminum core, then another radiator, so forth and so on. Now take a note of how this looks like, okay? And let me compare this with you, the original Behr intercooler. And let's go ahead and get the larger side, which is the compressed air side, the intake side, and you can see there's a big difference here. Okay, you can see that on the original intercooler, it actually has a tapered edge here of the core, so it's kind of acting like an aerodynamic edge. When the charged air is coming into the intercooler, it's being aerodynamically separated here to be funneled into the radiators more effectively. You see that? Let me put these side by side here. You'll know what I'm talking about. You put these side by side here. Okay? It's clear as day here. Okay? You can see there's a large surface area here, and here, okay, this has a tapered edge here. Okay, It's kind of the same theory when you're trying to port the head on your car. You know, when you create this tapered surface, you're allowing the air to effectively enter, the intake ports of your head. And by eliminating flat surfaces, you're eliminating friction of air, which is loss of power. So in theory, it looks like the stock intercooler is designed a lot better than this cheap eBay intercooler. Now, why am I still going to go with the eBay intercooler? Well, simply because it has a larger surface area. It allows me to cool the air more effectively. And it is proven. There was a couple of members on the mini forums that did these tests, and they noted that the intake air temperature was about 5 to 10 degrees cooler with the eBay intercooler compared to the stock intercooler. And of course, it was much more higher with the official AirTech and the GP intercoolers as well. So that's one thing to note there. And I just wanted to point that out to you guys, in the mini community, so that way you can make, a much more, informative choice. The stock intercooler really isn't that bad. I think it can move air more effectively, but as far as cooling the air goes, I think that the eBay intercooler will have an advantage with the larger surface area. And one thing to note too is that I heard the material with the stock intercooler, it also manages heat soak a lot better. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a smaller intercooler, so of course it's going to have a faster recovery time. But just comparing the two, I think this one has a faster rate of heat dissipation from heat soak versus the eBay intercooler. And of course, like I said, you get what you pay for, so if you're just going to be cheap like me, you won't really get much. But like I said, the reason why I'm going with this is just for the larger surface area, because I do most of my driving outside of traffic, and so I want the maximum amount of cooling. And so I'll always have air going through the intercooler versus someone who commutes more in traffic. You may want to stick with your stock intercooler. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. We're going to go ahead and install back the eBay Hobo intercooler, and we'll put those rubber strips around the rubber coupling, and we will test the car to see if we have any error codes pop up regarding any boost leaks. Alright, we'll pause it right here. Okay, you guys, so what I did here is I went one step further and I applied more of that thermal gold reflective heat tape on top of the intake plenum before it feeds into the cylinders here, and also on the inner side of this horn here. That way, when the air comes in from your hood scoop and it passes through the intercooler, it's basically going to be passing hot air onto the intake manifold plenum. So it's kind of going to be defeating the purpose of cooling the air in the first place, because you cool the air, but then the hot air that cooled the intercooler is now going to be contacting the surface of this intake manifold plenum, thus heating this part back up. Now I know you may say, well, this is bolted onto the engine block and heat transfers through direct contact between this and the block itself, or the head, should I say. But yeah, that's true, but at least this way you can minimize some of the effects of the heat convection that's created between this and the intake manifold plenum. So the tape is very cheap. It's only like $9 on eBay. Might as well use the most I can out of it. So I'll be trying to do more of this here. Maybe I might even do the outer side later, and then I might even do the intake, the air box for the intake. I might even do that one too, so just want to let you guys know a little tip on what I'm trying to do with that. Alright, let's go ahead and put everything back together, and let's see how the car will run right after. Okay, so here is what I was telling you about earlier with the rubber strips I cut from that old bicycle tube. I'm basically just going to wrap it right around this boot here, and it'll create a tighter seal as I put the clamps back on. That's the idea of doing that. So let's go ahead and do that now.
Okay, and so basically we're just trying to test to see if there's any leaks. I'm going to spray some carburetor cleaner here to see if it gets sucked in, so let's go and test that now. And we do not hear any boost leaks here, or vacuum leaks. Let's check this out. Again, I don't hear anything. Therefore, we've solved the problem. I hope you find this video helpful. Please smash the like button and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next journey. Peace.